why should I care? Because maybe you know what gluten is, but maybe you think it doesn't bother me, so I shouldn't care. So, and just a thank you to UM-Flint or University of Michigan Flint. I was told not to abbreviate from a friend, but for letting me do this. So a little bit of funny to start, because if you're a Facebook person or you're online, there's like all these like e-cards, and we call them memes. They're just funny pictures. One of the ones I saw that I like is like, I'm sorry, I thought celiac was the name of a transformer, like the Transformer movies. And I'm a big Star Trek fan, kind of a geek that way. And it says gluten allergy. Jean-Luc Picard's like putting his head down. He says, no problem, we ordered one pizza without cheese just for you. Just if you don't understand the joke, lactose-free is not gluten-free. It's totally a different thing, but people don't understand. So it's a little bit of humor to get us started. A quick disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a dietitian. I don't have any true medical training. I have taken one nutrition class at Mont Community College, but everything I know is what I've gleaned from people that I work with and the organizations that we deal with, and just from personal experience. I've been diagnosed with celiac disease since 2001. That's about 13 years. My father has it. My grandmother also had it. I could have other aunts and uncles and siblings that have it, but they haven't bothered to get tested. So that's a source of personal frustration sometimes. I'm also the chairperson or president of the Mid-Michigan Gluten-free Celiac Support Group. We are Chapter 59 of Celiac Support Association, a larger organization in someplace out west. I just turned in reports, you think I remember. We do have a web page, we do have a Facebook page. I can share you more of that later if you want to write it down. I'm also a blogger. I review products that I see at restaurants that I go to just for it to help people get information. I'm also the co-chair of the Lansing Gluten-Free Fair. We have a trade expo every October in Lansing, Michigan. Last year we actually had 800 people attend, which was up from 500 the year before that, so we're actually anticipating 1,000 people this year. People drive all the way from Canada, so that's pretty cool. And actually the samples that we have here today, the cookies and the cereal and the pretzels, are a company called Glutino. I'm actually an ambassador for Udi's and Glutino, which I think is really awesome that they have that. The bread is from Celiac Specialties. They are a Michigan company out of Novi. Yes?
You said the fair's in August?
October 18th. Yep. At least that's the day. We're still talking about the place we're going to reserve the hall, so we're pretty sure October 18th. So what is gluten? Gluten is a protein. It's found in wheat, rye, and barley. It's from the Latin word which means glue. It's basically the glue that holds your regular bread together. It gives elasticity to dough, helping it keep its rise and its shape. That's from Wikipedia. That's the best way. They explained it, summed it up pretty well, so I'm not going to elaborate too much. But yeah, it's what makes your bread light and fluffy and airy and wonderful, and that's why a lot of gluten-free breads are dense and sometimes hard as a brick, because it's missing that. It's actually composed of two different proteins, gliadin and glutenin. They're both found in the endosperm of the grain. And for someone to be defined as gluten-free, per the FDA, which is the Food and Drug Administration, it must be less than 20 parts per million. And the interesting thing is this definition only happened within the past year. So up until a year ago, if you ask somebody, well, what do you define gluten-free? They'd say, we don't have a definition yet. We're working on it. So we're really glad that that's taking place. That happened, I think, in August. So what does 20 parts per million look like? Because, I don't have $1 million, and it's hard to wrap your mind around big numbers sometimes. So, for an example, and this is an empty bag. This is my empty dog food bag. And it's a 35-pound bag that had dog food in it, but flour obviously would be a lot less. So the example of 20 parts per million, this is my pinch measuring spoon, which is really 1/8 of a teaspoon. So if I were to put this and 40 pounds of flour, obviously that wasn't a whole lot, that's 20 parts per million. If a product tests more than that, then it's not gluten-free. So just to kind of give you an idea of the realm of how much gluten can really affect a person. So where do you even find gluten? The one thing I want to emphasize, I actually was talking to somebody recently, and they said to me, and if you're that person in this room, I apologize. I don't know if you actually came because I don't know the person in person. It's not listed on your ingredient label. You're not going to read a label and it's not going to say gluten. Somebody said, well, it doesn't say gluten on my package of Oreos in the ingredients list. That means it's gluten-free, right? And I kind of had one of those John with the card moments. I'm like, oh no, we have so much awareness of gluten. So you will not see it on a label. So gluten is found in wheat, which means spelt. So if you are eating a gluten-free diet and you go to the health food store and you say, I need gluten-free bread, and they say, here, try this spelt bread, you say, no. That's probably one of the biggest issues we have as celiacs is people not understanding they keep trying to feed us spelt. Couscous, which is a kind of like rice, but it's actually made from wheat. So seitan, which is used to make vegetarian proteins. Kamut, graham, like graham crackers. Those are the big things, so obviously baked goods in general. But the things you may not realize it's in, Twizzlers, licorice. There is not a good gluten-free licorice on the market anywhere, sad to say, because it's not pliable like regular licorice. Soy sauce is a big problem. Pretty much for me, going out to eat Chinese food is impossible. Sagano's does have gluten-free soy sauce, so thank you to them. So that's possible, but can't, and therefore Worcestershire sauce too. Canned soups, medication. I went to a conference in November, and one of the cholesterol medicines, I think it was Tricor. Anyway, there's no actual wheat in the pill, but they coat it in wheat before they sell it to you. Why? They don't have a good answer as to why. They just do, and they're not going to change the way they do it. So we actually have to watch out for the medications that we need and take, and then also, like I said, baked goods. Gluten is found in barley, so malt is a derivative of barley, so if you have malt or malt vinegar, that's out. I highlighted Rice Krispies because they used to use malt syrup as a flavoring in their cereal. So regular Rice Krispies are a no. They have a separate gluten-free box of Rice Krispies, which honestly tastes like cardboard. They use something else now, but they took out the malt syrup. So candies, chips, there's a big issue right now with a company that's saying their chips are gluten-free, but it's doused in malt vinegar, so it's definitely not safe. And beer, the one thing I want to say really quick about beer, because beer is made from barley. There is a company called Omission Beer. They start with barley, and then they tell you, but we know how to take it out when we're done. Me personally, I'm not going to trust that, because if you start with this, then explain to me how you chemically can take it out. And actually the FDA says, no, that doesn't really count either. The FDA will tell you that it's not safe. There are certain groups that are saying it's safe because they have a new way of researching things. But if you're gluten-free, I would just stay away from Omission Beer. I'd pick Redbridge or New Grist or somebody else, or go with cider. It's also found in rye. You don't usually find rye in rye bread. There's usually not found added to other things as much. Oats is kind of a sticky issue. Oats in and of themselves are gluten-free, they really are. But the problem is they're usually processed and grown in the same fields as wheat. So when you harvest everything together, it's all dumped in the same bin, and then it's just coated in flour all over the place. So there are certain companies like Bob's Red Mill that does certified gluten-free oats. There are those of us who are celiac like myself. I still can't tolerate gluten-free oats. The proteins in it are too similar for my body, and I still react. So that's a kind of a you gotta learn as you go along. Cross-contamination is a big issue. The conference I was talking to, that I went to in November, soy flour. Soy in and of itself, gluten-free, totally gluten-free. But again, when we come into cross-contamination, they took flours, like soy flour and rice flour, almond flour, whatever, and tested them to see if they were 20 parts per million. Well, some of them were cross-contaminated. There was one soy flour that had, I think she said, 100 parts per million of gluten. So it's really important when you go buy gluten-free products, you want to find a logo that says certified gluten-free. So that really opened my eyes. Even though I've been doing this 13 years, I learned things that I need to change in my own diet. So what is safe to eat on a gluten-free diet? Whole foods. I don't mean the store. I mean real whole foods. Meat, dairy, vegetables, fruit. The majority of the food pyramid is perfectly safe if you're living a gluten-free lifestyle. It's when you start mixing and combining things that becomes the problem. Rice flour, corn flour, tapioca flour, potato flour, those are all gluten-free. And for a long time, the majority of our products have been made with that. The only issue with that is nutritional value and fiber. Those flours are so highly refined, the natural fiber is taken out, and really all the healthy stuff is taken out. So while they're good and they provide that light, airy, it really does work a lot like gluten-free, regular bread, there's not a whole lot of nutritional value. So there's a lot of bakers, myself included, that are trying to incorporate foods that have a lot of fiber in them and protein, because obviously the gluten is the protein, that's what you're missing, so you want to find flours high in protein. So bean flours are a big one. Bob's Red Mill, they have an all-purpose flour mix that's made with chickpea flour and some other flours. It's my go-to flour. Teff is an African grain, only grown in Africa. It's different, it's hearty, it's kind of a nutty taste, it's really good, but because it's only grown in one place right now, it's a little expensive. And it is very dark. So if you want your baked goods to not look really dark, it may not be the best thing for you. But amaranth, millet, quinoa, buckwheat, which buckwheat is a relative of rhubarb, and it's now in relation to wheat at all, regardless of the name. As well as almond flours, coconut flour. Coconut flour is actually really good if you're also diabetic. Coconut flour has very low glycemic index, for those of you that understand what that is. It doesn't raise your blood sugar as fast. The only downfall about coconut flour is it's really dry and it absorbs a lot of liquid. So you got to use like 3 times the eggs. Like if you have a recipe that calls for 2 eggs with coconut flour, you got to use 6. And if you got high cholesterol, then you got a whole other issue. But anyway, and then there's a new product, banana flour. I like bananas, but they take the non-ripe bananas and turn them into flour and use them into baked goods, and that's emerging on the market, so it's kind of cool. So who should stay away from gluten? I'm going to highlight a few different diseases or problems, but kind of an overview. Celiac disease is the one, it was what I have, the biggest one. It affects about 1% of the population. Dermatitis herpetiformis is a skin disease, hence the name dermatitis. They don't really have celiac disease the majority of the time, but eating gluten damages their skin. It's painful, it's itchy, it's red, it's not fun. So there are a few people in our support group that have DH. Again, it affects a lot lower portion of the percentage of the population, but it's there. And it's good to know, because maybe you think, oh, I just had eczema, but you don't. You've got something else, and it can be treated with diet. Gluten intolerance is emerging. We've finally gotten doctors to admit that it really exists. Before they said, oh, if you don't have celiac disease, then you're full of it. But no, that it really is true. It really does exist, and some of the biggest researchers in Chicago and Maryland are really doing a lot researching into this. We don't have a test for it yet, but I'll get more into that later. Also people with other autoimmune diseases, multiple sclerosis, Sjogren's. I'm drawing a blank, but there are others listed. They don't have necessarily celiac disease, but for some reason, the gluten in their body creates inflammation. And for some reason for them, taking the gluten on a diet does seem to be beneficial. Not everybody does them. Wheat allergy affects about less than 0.25% of the population. Gluten ataxia, I wasn't even going to mention this, but again, this is how conversation happens. Gluten ataxia is kind of a new disease. It's rare. They know of right now. What happens is gluten doesn't attack your intestinal linings, it directly attacks your brain. And it attacks the cerebellum. It's irreversible, and it destroys your motor skills. I wasn't even going to mention it, but I was talking about this with a friend on Facebook, and she goes, I think you just diagnosed my friend's ailment that she's had for 10 years. So please at least mention it in your speech. I said, okay, I'll do that. So it is out there, but it's new, emerging, and right now known to be rare. So celiac disease is a genetic autoimmune disease. It's not an allergy, it's an autoimmune disease. That affects the lining of the intestinal tract. Your intestines are lined with little finger-like projections. They're called villi. And when I eat gluten, my villi disappear. Now those villi absorb the nutrients from your food, so if I have no villi, then that means I don't absorb any nutrients from my food. And I tell people your body's like a machine, it's like a car. You gotta have, oil and transmission fluid. And if you don't have those things, stuff starts to go haywire. Same thing with your body. It's more common in Caucasians. At least right now, that's what we think. am interested in further study, especially I'd love to find some college students that want to be creative and do a study. They say that it does not affect the African American population as much, but I just found an article that basically said, you know what, that's not true. It's just not true. So I think we have a great possibility to do a lot of good. The problem with celiac is these people say, oh, what is gluten-free? You know, it wasn't around a long time ago. It was, but doctors were told, you may have one patient your entire career. That's how rare it is. But that's not true. It affects 1% of the population. You know, 1 out of every 133 people, actually more like 1 in 100. That doesn't seem really rare to me. You know, I'm sure there's, you know, tons of them here at the university that don't even know that they have it. And within the family, that number goes from 1 in 133 to 1 in 22. That's a huge jump. You know, like I said, my grandma had it, my dad has it, I have it. So if you have it or know somebody that has it, their whole family needs to be tested. And my dad is what we call a silent celiac. He didn't have symptoms. The only reason he knew it is he was in the Army. They somehow figured out something was wrong. He got medically discharged because they couldn't accommodate his diet. And then he just didn't understand what he needed to do. So he didn't really follow the diet until I was diagnosed and he was in his 40s. So it's important. So how do you get tested? The entryway is a simple blood test. It really is simple. Like you go get your cholesterol and your blood sugar tested. Same thing. They draw out blood. They do what we call a celiac panel. What it tests for is antibodies. What happens in the bloodstream is when you consume gluten, your body reacts. It's autoimmune disease, and it creates these antibodies because it's trying to fight off the gluten and what the reaction is. So you know, all of these abbreviations are long words that I honestly can't remember and say them all out loud. DGP is the deanimated gliadin protease, I think is what it's called. It's a newer test, and it's much more accurate. You know, before some of the tests they would do like the IgA, which was the tried and true, they had a huge percentage of false positives, and you don't want to put somebody through all that worry when they don't really have it. So they're doing a lot better. HLA, the genome, is a genetic disease, so they can test to see if you have the gene. But like any other disease, just because you have the gene doesn't mean you get the disease. It's like something has to flip that switch to turn it on to make you have the disease. So the benefit of that is you could be screened out. Like if you think you have it or you've got some bizarre health stuff going on, if they do the genetic test and you don't have the gene, then we know for certain you don't have celiac disease and you'll never develop it. So that is a benefit. As far as testing, once they do the blood test, that they find these antibodies in your bloodstream, the next test, and the gold standard, the word that the gastroenterologists use, is they need a small bowel biopsy. You know, I had one. I remember it was probably honestly the best sleep I'd ever had in my life. They knock you out, you go to sleep, you wake up, your throat's a little irritated, but then they're done. The really important part is they take samples, their little scalpels or whatever they do, of the tissues of the small bowel. Now sometimes what happens is a doctor, if they've got a lot of patients and they are busy and they want to get through their day, they'll take one sample and then off to the next patient and then I can make some more money. But the problem is that that's not accurate. They need to take at least 6 biopsies of your small bowel, and in different places too, they need to go along. So Dr. Salini is our resident gastroenterologist. I don't know if any of you know who he is. He has a facility like on Hill in 23. Really great man. And he's been I was looking at it over his bio today. He has literally been a doctor as long as I've been alive. Like he was board certified in 1978 when I was born. So he's had 35 years of practice. He can be trusted. So he knows what to do, and he's really great. So if you think you want to be tested and go through that, he's a great doctor to see. But the one thing I must get through, if you think you have celiac disease, do not change your diet, because again, that blood test is testing for those antibodies that are reacting when you eat the gluten. If you stop eating the gluten, then there's no antibodies. So even if you do have celiac, there's nothing to find. So don't change your diet until afterwards. Why is this important? There's lots of complications to celiac disease. Cancer, thyroid disease is a big one. There's a lot of people with celiac disease that also have thyroid disease. Osteoporosis and any type of bone disorders. The only treatment is lifelong adherence to the gluten-free diet. There are no pills for us to take. There's no gluten-free lactate type pill. There just isn't. They're trying to develop one, but right now there isn't anything. So now you know what celiac disease is. What does it look like? What are the symptoms? The normal symptoms, I put quotation marks because that's the one thing about celiac disease is everybody presents differently, so it makes it hard to diagnose. But with more common ones, abdominal pain, constipation, diarrhea, foul smelling, bulky stool, and a lot of bloating, persistent anemia, because again, your body is not absorbing nutrients, so you're not absorbing the iron from your diet to make your red blood cells. Failure to thrive in small children, they don't grow the way they should be growing, they seem to be short and stunted. Mouth sores, you get like canker, ulcer sores on the inside of your mouth. Dental enamel defects, the enamel doesn't completely grow over on your teeth, so you go to the dentist and they always tell you, oh, you are terrible at brushing your teeth, you need to do better. But it turns out really actually you have a disease and they don't get it. And quite honestly, a big one is depression and anxiety. There's a lot of neurological components that connect celiac disease. And to be honest, with the exception, well, no exceptions honestly, that whole left side, that's me. That was me before I was diagnosed. There are actually over 300 symptoms total to celiac disease. They're not totally specific just to them. They can be connected to other diseases as well, but some of them are joint pain, migraines, infertility, peripheral neuropathy, seizures, obesity, and that's a big one because before, doctors always thought if you are obese and overweight, then there's no way you could ever possibly have celiac disease because you're just too heavy. Not true. Not true anymore. So it's a trick to get the doctors to relearn their thinking, to undo their thinking and relearn again. Insomnia, liver and kidney disorders are on that list. My dad has kidney disorders. I've had insomnia. I've been obese. I have I've had seizures. I've been infertile. I've had migraines and joint pain. So we go through a lot. So we're not just picky eaters, I promise. Gluten intolerance, it's not an autoimmune disease. And because it's so new, like I said, they're not entirely sure where it is from. They're doing a lot of research. Some of the symptoms, they again have some of the abdominal symptoms, the bloating, the diarrhea, the constipation. A big one they talk about is brain fog. You just can't seem to think clearly. You just kind of can't focus. Skin rash, there's no testing at this point. The only way to define if you have gluten intolerance is to basically rule out everything else. There's no treatment except for avoiding gluten. Another thing about gluten intolerance is that there's another understanding in the medical community called FODMAP intolerances. FODMAP stands for fermentable oligomonosaccharides and polyols. What those are briefly, they're just short-chain carbohydrates. And for some reason, people that have a FODMAP intolerance, those don't break down the way they should. And it causes gas and bloating and abdominal problems. I don't remember if it's the disaccharides or the monosaccharides. Gluten fits into one of those arms. It's one of those. So like polyols, those are your sugar alcohols. So like I know for myself, if I eat anything with artificial sugar and the sugar alcohols, I am nauseous immediately for off. So, and then the oligo tends to be like if you have certain fruits and vegetables that seem to just rub you the wrong way and you don't know why, that could be your problem. So the gluten intolerance might actually be under that arm of these situations. They actually, NFCA, and I put some flyers in the back table, the National Foundation for Celiac Awareness is actually having a webinar tomorrow online that's free if you want to learn more about the FODMAP intolerances. Other autoimmune diseases, like I was mentioning, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, could also benefit, those people could also benefit from a gluten-free diet. There's actually a strong link also between celiac disease and type 1 diabetes. If you know somebody, a young child, that has type 1 diabetes and they've never been tested for celiac disease, I would highly suggest they be tested. And actually Dr. Salimi says that any child that comes in with Down syndrome, he automatically tests them for celiac disease because there's a strong connection. And then when you have one autoimmune disease, they're like birds of a feather, they flock together. When you have one, you're more likely to get another. Like I was saying with people with celiac, they have thyroid disease, they just hang out together. So, and we don't really know why that's why people are helped, they just are. It's not a causational relationship, one doesn't cause the other, it's more like a correlational. Like we're not totally sure the reason why, but it's there. And one other quick thing, autism. And this is, not everybody agrees with this, but I don't know if I'd say proof, but there's lots of anecdotal stories. There have been parents and families that they have benefited by putting their autistic child on a gluten-free, casein-free diet. Casein is the protein in milk and dairy products. So gluten, protein in wheat, rye, barley, casein, protein in dairy products. So, stories of kids who, totally regress, not talking, literally smearing their own feces in the wall, take the gluten out of their diet, total 180 degrees, normal kid. Totally honest. So there's a lot more research going on with that. There is wheat allergy. It's an actual wheat allergy response, but it's only to wheat. They're not bothered by rye. They're not bothered by barley. They just have a wheat allergy. The typical symptoms of allergies: hives, watery eyes, anaphylaxis. They can do a skin test or the allergy test they do on your back. Again, you need to avoid wheat. They can take antihistamines and epinephrine to kind of help with that. So should everyone stay away from gluten? In my opinion, and then the doctors that I respect and trust, not necessarily. I think right now, especially when people don't feel well and they don't have time to research things, we like to try to pick one easy thing and say, oh, nobody should ever eat this ever again. My husband eats wheat. He's got his own little shelf in our house. That's where all of his gluten-containing products go, and then the rest of the house is gluten-free. So for you, maybe you should. Like we talked about that gluten intolerance population where we're just not really sure about everything yet. Maybe you should avoid gluten. But personally, I'm not at a point where I think everybody should avoid it. I'm not ready to say that. And part of the reason is why is B vitamins and whole grains. I did a project in my nutrition class about this, and understanding the importance of B vitamins in your diet. And this is good for everybody to know. Your B vitamins are typically found in your whole grains, not B12. B12 is found in your meat protein products. But B vitamins are important. They regulate your metabolism, your nerve function, protein synthesis, so that your body can repair itself, your antibodies, neurotransmitters, so your brain can talk to your nerve cells. It regulates your cholesterol, your heartbeat, and your blood pressure. And the reason that's important is, as I said before, a lot of our products are made with that rice flour, tapioca flour, potato starch, no B vitamins. It's all been taken out. So that's really a problem. There's a lot of us that have other issues because we don't have those B vitamins in our diet. And our products aren't fortified. If you go to the grocery store, you look at a box of cereal or other stuff, it'll say, enriched wheat flour fortified with niacin and ferritin and all that stuff. Our products simply aren't. Just aren't. So we, especially celiacs, we have to try to find as many of those whole grains as we possibly can. Eat brown rice, try to go for the teff and the whole grain buckwheat. Just a word on Willis. I know that a big book right now is the Wheat Belly Diet. I'm not going to say that he's totally wrong. I'm not going to say he's totally right. But the one thing I will say, and I do work at Curves, I am a fitness instructor. I used to be 230 pounds, so believe me, exercise does work. Calories in equals calories out, and a gluten-free cookie is still a cookie. A gluten-free donut is still a donut. Just by eating a gluten-free donut doesn't mean you're going to lose 50 pounds because you still have to learn to eat right. So that's my thing about that, and I'll shut up. If you think you have a problem with gluten, again, you must get tested first. And an example, a lady from our support group thought for certain she had celiac disease, was found in the gluten-free diet. Turned out later she had cancer. Gluten wasn't her problem. She had cancer. So it's really important. I've heard people say, well, I think I have a problem with gluten, so I'm just going to cut it out of my diet, and that's all I'm going to do. I'm like, well, maybe. But maybe you could have, colon cancer. Maybe you could have another cancer in your body that's throwing things off. Maybe you could have Crohn's disease, which is totally a different beast in the way it's treated. So it really is best to get tested first. If you go through and they say, nope, you don't have celiac disease, and they've ruled out other things, and you want to try taking gluten out of your diet because you think you might be gluten intolerant, that's fine. But please, please, please just make sure you take the routes that you should. We don't want you to die from cancer. So learning to eat gluten-free, focus on what you can have. When I was diagnosed at first, to be honest, it didn't really change my diet. I was going to college, I was doing my student teaching in Lansing, I was living with my mom. She didn't totally understand it, so I still ate baked chicken for dinner because I didn't have money to go buy all my own groceries. So it's about learning, and once you do, you think, oh, all this stuff is gone from me now. Like, oh, I can't have cookies anymore, and I can't have fun cereal, and bread is totally out. Like, no, it's not. It's about learning what you can have, again, focusing on those whole foods. Like I was talking before about trying to find things that are certified gluten-free, that you'll see that GF circle on a lot of things. That is through the gluten intolerance group. They've been around for a long time, and they're probably the first group to certify anything. And one of the cool things, as we're trying to get ready for the Lansing Gluten-Free Fair, one of the companies that has the test that allows you to certify something that's gluten-free is made in Lansing, Michigan. Neogen Company is a company that's in Lansing, Michigan. They are really great. They take over old schools and turn them into their factories. I'm like, we need them to come to Flint because we got lots of old schools that are closed. And they have a test they develop. They send to the companies like Glutino and Jules Gluten-Free and other companies use to make sure that their test that really does come under that 20 parts per million. And if it's certified with any of these logos, the GF logo, and then CSA has their own logo, and NFCA is going to start having their own logo, they're not only under 20 parts per million, they're under 10 parts per million. So this is really strict testing. So if you see that GF circle, feel good. It's quite possibly that a Michigan company helped make it safe. And again, talking about cross-contamination again, like talking about the soy flour, you got to be careful with what you buy. And then dining out gluten-free can be a bit tricky. It's, like the picture of John Luke saying, we ordered you a pizza with no cheese. I'm trying to get people to understand, because like, for example, if I go to a restaurant and I order a salad and I say no croutons, and I bring it up, and it's got croutons on it, I can't just pick the croutons off. It's already contaminated. It's already going to make me sick. So trying to get wait staff and dining staff, even here at the university, to understand that is really important. And to have options is really important. And FCA has a training program called Great Kitchens. There's only one restaurant in all of Michigan certified with the Great Kitchens program. It's in Okemos, Michigan. It's called Without Wheat, and he makes the best pizza I've ever had in my life. He's really good. So I also want to give a big thank you to, I'm just going to say Marcia D. She's in charge of the dining services here. If I pronounce her last name, I'll probably butcher it. So I had a great chance to talk to her 2 weeks ago. We had a snowstorm. My husband had the day off of school, and I said, hey, let's go check out Herbert and Gerbert. And we're going to go up there. So we did, and Marcia just happened to have some downtime, sat down and talked to me and explained to me about how she cares for the students here. And it's not that University of Michigan Flint says do this, this, and this. It's that she understands that there are students here, and they should be cared for. She's not necessarily here, but a previous place that she had worked, she would go to the store herself. She even ordered stuff. She'd go to the local health food store because she cared about one student and wanted them to be safe and wouldn't have it here on campus. So the staff here actually does know a lot, and they are doing a lot, and I'm really proud of them. So big props to University of Michigan Flint. I know, for example, like MSU, a much bigger university, like how do you accommodate that many students? They actually have a dedicated fridge and freezer. They've got a dedicated toaster oven and a toasting space. So they have their own designated space. So it's a lot of training. And my thing too, when I talk to people, I'm like, as passionate as I am about celiac disease and gluten-free, I want people to understand everybody with a food allergy should be just cared for, whether they're allergic to peanuts or soy or dairy or shellfish. My husband's allergic to shellfish and pork, which is really weird, but we're a weird household. So yeah, it's just about being aware. So I added this picture. It says, you're celiac, and across the pond in England, they put an O in celiac. Why? I don't know. They just do. It says, you're celiac when you have written contaminated on jars of jam. When we go to my in-laws in Lansing, I have to basically open a new jar of peanut butter, because otherwise they've taken the peanut butter and dipped the knife in and spread it on their bread, and then dip the knife back in, spread it on the bread, and the crumbs end up in the peanut butter. And that sounds really picky, but we're really serious that we can get sick from that. So my husband is really awesome. When we go to, it's kind of funny, our celiac support group meetings, we always do potluck. And so sometimes people bring bread, and if there's butter, he's like, okay, I gotta be really careful with the butter so I don't get gluten. He's like, oh wait, it's all gluten-free. I don't have to worry about crumbs here, we're all good. So yeah, that's, it seems like a picky thing, but yeah, I love it when Smucker's has like a low sugar squeeze jelly container. I'm like, that's what I love, because I can't stick the knife back in it, so we're good to go. So sometimes it's easier if you can put the idea, 1%, what does that mean, of celiacs. I found this really great website. It's got a celiac and non-celiac gluten sensitivity calculator. So I plugged in, for study population, I plugged in the population of Genesee County. That's 400,000 people, approximately, in Genesee County. So if we say 1% of celiacs have, or 1% of the population has celiac disease, that means there's 4,000 people in Genesee County alone that have celiac disease. But the one thing about celiac disease, only 17% of us are really diagnosed. And you think, well, how do you get that number? The Red Cross has been really great with working with the Chicago Celiac Center and in Massachusetts and Boston as well. And they've done testing that they've taken just random blood samples and they've tested for the genes and the antibodies for celiac disease, and they're there. So, and they've done this multiple times. So that really is, they're really pretty certain that 1% of the population. So if only 17% of us are diagnosed, it's only 680 people in all of Genesee County know that they've got a problem. So that means there's over 3,000 people that have celiac disease that are really sick and they don't know why. So we definitely have our work cut out for us. And then if you think about non-celiac gluten sensitivity, some doctors think it's 6%, some think it's 10%. I think those are really big numbers. I like 4. I try to shoot under. So even if 4% of the population in Genesee County have non-celiac gluten sensitivity, and therefore should stay away from gluten, that's 16,000 people. That's a lot of people. A lot of people. So it behooves us to be knowledgeable. So why should you or anybody else care? The average length of onset of symptoms when you start having a problem to the time you're diagnosed is at least 10 years. I had issues when I was in high school, had no idea that my dad had celiac. You know, my parents knew, but they didn't say anything. Total embarrassment in my childhood years. You know, roommates I didn't understand. You know, I would wait to go to the bathroom on campus to be really serious. And instead of having them say things about me being smelly at home, I'd wait to go to the bathroom when I got on campus. I would like to shorten that. And a lot of damage can happen in those years. I have cavities because the enamel didn't grow over on my teeth. You know, I had fear of dentists for forever. I go to the dentist and I was nauseous. I couldn't stand going to the dentist. He'd always tell me how bad I was with my teeth, and it really wasn't me, it was my body. And I still have knee problems. You know, there's certain machines that curves that I can't push as hard as other people because I still have knee problems. And I think about it this way, I'm pretty passionate about children as well. How children are affected. I was reading some research even this week, and they said, you know, even though some children present with the typical abdominal issues, a lot of them present with behavioral issues. That's really where it starts. The inability to focus, ADHD, failure to thrive. I don't want kids to have to suffer. Nobody wants their kids to suffer. So, you know, especially when we talk about, you know, my husband's a teacher, and we talk about MEP scores and kids not doing as well as they should. If there's an underlying issue that has nothing to do with their ability, you know, their desire to learn, there's something else holding them back and they have to fight against it. That's almost not fair. When I was in high school, I know I had celiac looking back then, I would fall asleep in my 5th hour class every day after lunch. Almost every day. Now luckily it was my French class and I always had the same French teacher and she got to know me and she would see me like trying to keep my eyes open and fight it. And some days she just like let her sleep, you know, let it go. She's got an A in the class, we'll do all right. But it's really important. You know, some people aren't, you know, had I realized when I was a kid and was able to skirt all those issues, I'd be a lot better than I am now. And long-term effects, you know, like I said, I still have knee problems, osteoporosis. You know, you stop building your bones when you're 18. That was one thing that really shocked me when I took my nutrition class. Calcium absorption is so important for kids because once they get past 18, you're not growing bones anymore. That's it. No offense, it's all downhill from there. You're going to lose your bone density after that. So in that respect, if you have a kid that's got celiac disease that's never absorbed the calcium from their diet, they're not going to build bone mass after they go gluten-free if they're past 18. The damage is done and it's permanent. So there's lots of long-term effects. Simon Celiac talked about my dad, but I was just reading on the Celiac Disease Foundation is working with Quest Diagnostics, which is probably one of the biggest labs. I know that's where all my tests, I get tested, is Quest Diagnostics. Father, older father, I think he's 60s or 70s, dying of cancer. Found out later it was because he had celiac disease. He didn't survive, unfortunately, he still died. But because it's genetic, then all of his family was tested, and his sons who were younger were able to find that out and change their life. And in a sense, be saved and not go through the same thing. So it's really important. And then I was just talking to somebody earlier, we talk about bullying, that's a big thing now, kids getting bullied in school. Honestly, there are kids getting bullied because they have a food allergy, which really doesn't seem, bullying is bad enough as it is, but something that a child really can't control is frustrating. I was reading a story about a parent, a son who was in 2nd grade, and he was allergic to peanuts, and the kids wanted to pick on him. So they physically held him down and smeared his whole body with peanut butter. I don't even have kids, but even saying that, I just want to start crying right now. It's just appalling. And then the stuff that he had to go through, the mom talked about how she took him out of the school because the school didn't want to deal with it. And so I think he ended up even getting homeschooled, and the kid had to go to therapy, and later down the year, realizing in later years, he's like, Mom, why do they try to kill me? What did I do wrong? Nothing. You didn't do anything wrong. It's just people don't understand, and we just need to learn to be sensitive, because we should be outraged and appalled at stuff like that. So, and sometimes it's about learning about how to talk about things. We have classroom parties, and sometimes you might say, well, we're not going to have that in this classroom because we want to respect Johnny and his allergies. But kids may not always hear it come out that way, and all they hear is, I don't get to have what I want because of so and so. Let's attack so and so because then maybe I can get what I want. So it's a big it's a challenge. It's a challenge. It's important we train our educators and our principals and our school staff how to deal with not only gluten allergies but all allergies. Social implications are big. Potlucks, that's why we have potlucks at our support group meetings, because people know they can come and they can eat whatever they want. But we always make sure that we tell everybody, you need to bring a copy of your recipe, because someone may have food allergies other than just gluten. They may not have, we have people that have dairy allergies, we have people with peanut allergies, my husband's got pork and shellfish. You need to know, we need to respect that. So it's important. Communion, we have a lady that just joined our support group, had a long talk with her, and it's amazing the things that you take for granted until you can't have it anymore. And she and I were talking about the concern about communion. And she said she remembers the first time going to church after being diagnosed with celiac disease, and it was time for communion, and she just sobbed. Because that thing that was so important a part of her religious experience, she couldn't be a part of anymore. She can now, they have gluten-free communion at her church. But that is a hard thing. It is a hard thing. And at my church, I started bringing gluten-free bread for communion, and sometimes gluten-free bread is not always the tastiest thing. And people started complaining, we want to go back to the way things were, we like the bread that we liked, without totally understanding that part of the word communion is community, and it's about us being together. And so social implications for people with celiac disease and any food allergies are hard. Kids going to summer camp, they can't usually go to regular summer camp because of that staff. I don't know about you, but if my kid's got a severe food allergy, I'm not just going to send them anywhere because I don't want my kid to die or get sick. So there are gluten-free camps and other food allergy camps coming up around the country. We actually have one that we sponsor that's in Grand Rapids at the YMCA Manitoulin campus. So it goes really well. They've been doing it for years. The people that run it are actually it's sponsored by the Lansing Celiac Support Group, and the people that run it are nurses. They get it, and they get other food allergies as well. Like I said, classroom parties, so it's a big thing. And then just in general, it may not happen to you, but your awareness may help someone you know. Like when I was talking to my friend Erica about, gluten ataxia, I said, this is a rare thing, and she goes, I seriously, I think that's what's wrong with my friend. And it's just through conversation, you may not have it, but you may be able to say to somebody after listening to me today, that really sounds a lot like what Margaret was talking about. Maybe, my best friend or my neighbor or my coworker should really be tested for celiac disease. So there's lots of resources, there's lots of organizations. Then the first picture is the Celiac Spirit Association, that's our parent organization. The National Foundation for Celiac Awareness, Gluten Intolerance, and the Celiac Disease Foundation, they all work together. There is another group, as someone was asking me today, what do we do about going after Monsanto and lobbying? There is a group that's like the Association of Celiac Federations or something. That's what they do. All these groups have a lobby group, and that's just that lobby group that tries to make change come about. Support groups are important. I'll definitely say that because I'm the president of ours, but there's just so many things that people understand. Dr. Salini is really great. He'll always say, I will refer a new celiac to a dietitian, but with all the stuff they need to know, they don't understand all the intricacies of being diagnosed with celiac disease. So he sends every person that he gets to be diagnosed, he emails us. He says, you need to call this person and you need to come alongside them and help them walk this journey. So, and my big thing is trying to get my support group to understand I'm the new, but it's not a new organization, but I'm new to leadership. And while it's good that we have people come and we invite them and we take care of them, we need to be just about as awareness. You know, the CSA motto is celiacs helping celiacs. So we also want to help those celiacs that aren't even diagnosed yet. So sometimes we need to be able to get our foot out the door and go to health fairs and come to things like this and talk and present. There's research centers, the University of Chicago Celiac Disease Center. They're really cool. Dr. Guandolini actually spoke at Farmington Hills last month. When you get diagnosed, if you send them a copy of your records, they send you a huge care package absolutely free with cookbooks and food and pretty much anything you ever need to know. And the Center for Celiac Research and Treatment is in Boston. That is Dr. Fasano, Alessio Fasano. He has a new book coming out, actually seriously just came out this week. And it's basically an overview of gluten and what it really does. You can contact us. Our email address is midmichiganglutenfree@gmail.com. Celiac Central also has a web page, a kit called Getting Started. It is 48 pages long. It does cover lots of things, as well, not just celiac disease, but also gluten sensitivity, and it has recipes and all sorts of stuff. So you can go to that link. It will ask you to register so that they have your information, but it's really simple, and it's really nice. They just updated it in December, so it's really current. So again, just for further information, you can contact me. That's our support group Gmail address. That's my phone number. Feel free to call me. It's a cell phone number. I don't have a home phone. And then Dr. Salimi, I just want to put up his information because he really has been instrumental in the running of our group, and he comes and speaks once a year free of charge. He doesn't charge us anything. He just comes and shares what he knows. So he's always been really, really helpful. So that is the end of what I've got. I realize I've talked for, almost an hour now. So I want to open up for a question and answer, and I don't have anything to do the rest of the day, so if you want to talk to me later, that's great. Go ahead. Yeah.
Is there a way that I can get a copy of your PowerPoint?
Yeah, sure. As long as I get your email address, I will forward it to you. Not a problem. Yes.
If someone thinks they might be gluten intolerant or any of these other things where it might help to be off gluten, how long a trial period do you need to have to know if there might be a difference or not?
That's a really great question. For people that are celiac, a lot of them will notice a difference in as little as 2 weeks. But depending on how much damage has been done, it depends, because you need to take time for those intestines to heal. One thing that often happens, a lot of times when you're diagnosed with celiac disease, the doctors tell you to stay away from dairy for a while, because those enzymes that break down the lactose are found on those villi that are damaged now. So once the healing comes about, then you usually can add lactose dairy products back into the diet. I would say maybe give it at least 2 months. And again, I'm not a doctor or a dietitian, and I don't have a hard and fast number. Unfortunately, I don't have a good answer. So I could say I don't really know, but my guess is say, it's not like you can try it for a day and it's going to be better. You got to give it time. So, but there are some celiacs that have problems forever. But even though their intestines heal, there's there's always the exception to the rule. That even though they're on the gluten-free diet, they're still miserable, and the healing is never going to happen. And it's a very small subset, very, very small, but there's always the exception to the rule. So I definitely a month. I'd say definitely a month, maybe at least 2, because your body takes a long time to heal. Any other questions? Yes.
How does gluten affect somebody with fibromyalgia?
That's a really great question. From my understanding, and again, this is my understanding, I'm not a nurse, doctor, dietitian, it's that the gluten causes inflammation. And with any autoimmune disease, it's the inflammation that really is the problem, which sets off all of the symptoms. So it's the same thing with multiple sclerosis. That my understanding is because it causes inflammation in the body. So that's the best answer I have. I'm willing to take any other questions seriously. definitely eat the food that was really nice. They don't usually do that, I don't think, but they provide food. Because originally I said, I work for Udi's and Glutino, I'll just bring in samples, and they said, we don't allow outside food. And I said, why? Well, that's just our rule. I said, okay. So they said, but we will offer the foods that we have here. So again, the cookies, the sandwich cream cookies, the cereal, and the pretzels are all made by Glutino. They're originally a Canadian company, but they were bought by a company that wanted to buy a bunch of companies that's in Boulder, Colorado. And then the bread is from Celiac Specialties. They're originally a small town bakery that was in Chesterfield Township over by Selfridge Air Force Base, and they've grown, now they've moved to Novi, and so their donut holes are the best things I've ever had in my life. So, but that is their regular bread, and I'm assuming their cinnamon raisin bread. So, and the cereal, the Glutino cereal, I think is like a honey nut. And again, I'm sorry they didn't bring the boxes. I should have said you need to make sure to bring packaging because people have other food allergies. So, but Udi's and Glutino are really great. They sponsor a lot of stuff. They do a lot of awareness. Actually, Udi's has, and I've talked to them for UM-Flint, they have a college ambassador awareness program where now they're trying to go into colleges and say, let us help you make your dining services not only gluten-free, but to better understand food allergies and how you can prevent cross-contamination. So this is a new thing. They started about a year ago. So there are lots of companies out there doing a lot of good. Now, does everybody here have gluten issues, or raise your hand if you had no idea what gluten was today before today? Pretty much. You've heard, okay. But we're just, okay. So everybody else, I'm going to assume, has been affected by gluten in their family in some way, shape, or form, or you're a medical person and you want better understanding. So, because there's lots more stuff I could talk about. I had a friend that was going to come today, and he's like, so is this gluten 101 or 201? I'm like, I guess gluten 101. Because there's so much stuff you could say, yeah.
What about a reduced, for people who don't have these main issues, a reduced gluten diet? Are there any studies on that? Or because they increased the gluten years ago when they popped up the wheat.
Right.
And they super emphasized the gluten in the wheat. So does it help for the average person, you can reduce maybe 89% gluten-free? Do you have read any information on that?
I don't know. I will say this though, like there is no cheating if you have celiac disease. There is no cheating, no
Right.
cheating, no cheating, no cheating, no cheating. That is a big thing, And then sometimes, I was saying to someone like, we need someone like Michael J. Fox to be the face of celiac disease, because we have some people speaking for the celiac disease population. They're not the best spokespeople to have. Elizabeth Hasselbeck, bless her heart, she's nice, she's sweet, and she's doing a lot. You've got people like Gwyneth Paltrow that are doing it because they think it's healthy, but then they say, well, but I let my kids have gluten sometimes. Well, then they say that, and they think I can have gluten sometimes. Like, I can't have gluten ever. I feel really bad about it because my husband's grandmother passed away, and the last time we met, we had a family dinner, and my mother-in-law had stirred a dish that was a gluten-free dish for me, and then was going to stirred the other one with the same stir and was going to put it back in. And my brother-in-law, bless his heart, because I said, at first I said, no, and grandma's like, you gotta be kidding me. There's no way you can possibly get sick. And luckily my brother-in-law, who is not always my best friend, but in this moment was my hero, said, yeah, Grandma, actually, she can. And so, unfortunately, that's the last memory I have of Grandma, but it's nice that you have people stick up for you. So, and she was going to be here, but she didn't show up. I have a friend, her name is Mary Brooks. She is a gluten-free baker. She started baking out of her home due to health necessity out of her and her daughter. And she has years of history of baking. She's baked for the Laundry and Fenton for years and made amazing stuff, and now is making the switch. So she has a company she's calling Viola Faye. I think that's her grandmother's name, or an aunt or somebody. But you can find her products at the Crust, and you can find them at the Flint Farmers Market. So, and her stuff is really amazing, like really, really amazing. And she tries to use organic and local products as much as she possibly can. And she tries to use as many whole grains as she possibly can. She doesn't focus on the rice and whatever. She really is awesome. She's really nice, really nice. So that would be my comment. Yeah.
I've had my daughters have celiac, so I have to cook gluten-free when they're home. But I've run into two cooking problems. One, there's a family favorite pastry at Christmas time that I have botched, and with any gluten-free flours I've tried.
And what is it?
Banquet. Dutch pastry.
Yeah, like phyllo dough and gluten-free it doesn't work. It doesn't.
Is there any, like where, is there any place that converts recipes for you?
Actually, NPR just had.
If there's a new
the task
cookbook,
force.
the America's Test Kitchen has a book called How Can It Be Gluten-Free? It just came out literally like last week or 2 weeks ago. My dad just got it in the mail. And all my bloggers my gluten-free bloggers that I follow, use it. They strictly do use though, those rice flours and those tapioca and the potato starch. So if you want health, it's not healthy.
Well, there's
But
nothing
it-
healthy about this pastry.
Right, okay. So I don't know if they did. I didn't listen to it, but I did share it with our Facebook page. Did they do phyllo
They
dough?
have given, they are trying to.
They're
do
trying.
phyllo dough.
Yeah.
They have given conversions if you don't want to use the Zantac, you know,
Same
or
thing.
the stuff. It sounded like they were very knowledgeable and you should be
Yeah.
able to figure
Well,
something out.
and the great thing about America's Test Kitchen is they understand the science behind, and that's how they can figure it out. So that would be
will help with my second question, which is which flour to use for white sauces, because I've also.
I just even use Bob's Red Mill brown rice flour for a white sauce. I mean, it's not that dark. So
The all-purpose flour is just.
you can give me because the all-purpose flour isn't meant to make a sauce.
Yeah.
It's meant to bake with. So like I keep brown rice or even rice flour on hand just for that purpose, for making a sauce. I don't usually do that. My husband's the really cool cook. I'm the baker. He doesn't know how to bake. He's the cook. He makes all the cool stuff and he knows how to do that. So and there are lots of great cookbooks out there. Lots of helpful cookbooks and that type of stuff. My
Tapioca starch or sauce.
yeah.
So that makes-
And then we went to a restaurant, as I was talking about gluten-free and Chinese food like not working together. There's a place in the Farmington Hills area, which I don't even remember the restaurant's name, but again about pride, because they did crispy shrimp, but they did it in cornstarch. I was like, oh gosh, I'm going to heaven. This is so amazing. Oh my gosh. So yeah, and again, my husband does the sauce thing, and I don't know how to do that stuff. So yeah, any other questions?
Is there anything else you can say, like the tie between the gluten and like ADHD?
I can't, there's nothing I can totally pinpoint, but again, we talk sometimes about the blood-brain barrier, we talk about leaky gut. When someone has celiac disease, some of that bad stuff in your body can leak through your gut because it's damaged the intestinal wall so much. So things leak out of the intestine, go into your bloodstream and go to your brain. So that's how it causes neurological and behavior issues. And like I just said, like your body's like a machine. Like you need to be able to absorb all these nutrients for your body to work properly. So my understanding is that would be my understanding. I don't know the definite answer, but my guess would be because you're just not absorbing the nutrients that you need. There's 2 kids that come to our after-school program at church on Wednesdays and Thursdays. And I'm telling you, even though they're African American, which is supposedly less than the population, I'm almost certain. So I don't know their parents, and when the after-school program, sometimes, especially in inner city, the parents send you. We'll see you later when you come back, and there's not a good working, communicating relationship. So, because the one kid, he's got fillings all the way from the back of his mouth to the front, and I'm like, okay, and he stinks up the bathroom, and he's in there forever. I'm like, red flag, red flag, red flag for me. So, and then again, and it goes back to nutrition in general. I think a lot of the kids in our city, especially in Flint, they may not necessarily be hungry, but I wouldn't doubt they're malnourished because they're just not eating the fruits and vegetables they need. So I think it really goes back to nutrition, but that's my best answer.
Oh, really?
That's my guess. So, thank you. You're welcome. Yes.
Does the gluten affect type
I've
2
been over
diabetes? Because I know she said type 1 up there.
Well, in a sense, if we talk about autoimmune diseases, that they flock together. When you have one autoimmune disease, you're more likely to have another. So, and I think that's because the immune system is already damaged. Again, I don't think that celiac disease causes type 2 diabetes. Again, it's a correlational situation.
I'm just kind of wondering if there's something, because obviously you got gluten in the bread, the carbs
Right.
are what's going to cause the sugar to go up, so that's why I was wondering.
Right. Well, but you can remember, gluten is a protein, it's not a starch. So the starch is what's raising your blood sugar, not the protein. Right. So it's possible, but
No, she's not.
So
So the protein actually causes inflammation.
it is the protein that's causing the inflammation, right? The gluten is the protein. So, any other questions? Feel free to take some cookies and stuff home, because otherwise they'll probably just pitch them.
He does, he has, I don't know what else he's gonna do, he does so stuff with, I don't think he'll ever,
You tried drinking, you haven't even tried it.
I don't think he'll ever.
I don't like beer in general.
Yeah, like, it's somebody that, you know, she's a big, she, and he, well, I mean, she babysat.
Right, yeah.
I don't know.
Quite for my girls, well, I was just doing his drawing, but everybody left.
No, I'm here. How many?
My mom.
I didn't send them.
Yeah. No, me too. I get the non-ulcers and sort of.
I just actually,
Really. I wouldn't do it because the omission thing is a big deal. Because unfortunately, it's CSA who is our parent company, parent organization, that said, yeah, it's safe.
but, yeah.
Coconut oil is a
Yeah,
huge
you know,
one.
He has his blood in
Yeah. There is a blogger who I read sometimes. Sometimes he can be really cantankerous with the people. But his name is Gluten Dude. And there are people, I didn't mention this, like there are people that, there was a lady, I can't remember which blogger it was, I follow so many, that went to a restaurant and she talked to the chef. He came and sat at the table and she still got gluten. And she had been depressed that whole thing. Like, I think she was on the point of like wanting a divorce. Like she was just going crazy. And it really was because of the gluten. It really was because she got gluten. And so, you know, with the dude, and I feel bad because he emailed me. I shouldn't have was really.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But
you know, it's
there's
one
a
of those
beer.
you do it.
I think it's developed overseas.
I get
He
it.
swears by it. It's called
Get
Gluten-free.
there to be there.
And that is, he swears up and down. I don't know anybody that drinks more alcohol than him. Let me tell you, if I have an alcohol question, he's the person I need to get in touch with. Because I had a question, a restaurant called for whiskey or called for something, and I was like, I don't know if this is gluten-free. I should contact him because he'll know. He knows every alcohol under the sun. But Glutenberg is one that he talks about a lot. Maybe Eucharist. I think I've tried the Eucharist. And again, I've never like even tried the diagnosis, so I'm not
You
a
haven't
good
done
person
them.
to
No,
ask.
you're supposed to be.
But I know some people, who like
That was Steve still here and remember last night.
yeah,
You got here to win?
Brittany,
Did she say that?
Brittany Walker. You could mail them to them, can't you? Put a stamp
No,
on
I think Teresa, I've always done them, so they'll just be here.
it. Is it Harvey Jackson?
Okay, well then let's just be.
Might be easier just to see who's
Connie
left.
Lamb, you're Connie, aren't you? Okay. Melissa Richardson,
That is all.
Jamie Zane.
If you get to where you don't have anybody left,